NFL free agency or legal tampering officially started here on Monday, and it was crazy. Let's talk about all of it here right now. NFL Spotlight starts now. Welcome in. It is the Tuesday, March 11 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. We are recording this here late Monday night, and Monday, what a day it was. I mean, we talked about it all of last week. We talked about it on Monday morning's episode. We said it is going to be crazy deals galore, a lot of things going on. Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, was not working to start the day, which was absolutely insane. But everything is back, and we had a lot of movement around the NFL as we expected. As of this recording, I have over 70 deals already in place, and more is going to happen over here probably by the time you listen to this and throughout the course of today as well. But many things have gone down. Let's talk about all of it over here. We had quarterback movement, offensive line movement, defensive backs, literally every position. And of course, we had a big trade as well. We're going to talk about all of it over here right now. Let me bring in my good friend Ben Allen. Ben, what is going on? I've said it before. I'll say it again. The offseason is my regular season, and everyone saw why here on Monday.
Yeah, and this day in particular seemed to be kind of record-breaking with the amount of moves that we saw. I mean, from the days before, going into the hours before, to the first hour, everything was absolutely chaos. But let's go ahead and start with the most important position on the field, that being the quarterback. We saw some minor moves like Josh Dobbs signing with the Patriots. We saw Jimmy Garoppolo going back to the Rams, Jarrett Stidham back to the Broncos, Nick Mullins going to the Jaguars. List kind of goes on and on with some of those minor guys. Kenny Pickett getting traded. But the two biggest deals of the day have to be Sam Darnold going to the Seattle Seahawks on a 3-year, $100.5 million deal, and Justin Fields signing with the Jets on a 2-year, $40 million deal. What were your biggest takeaways from these groups of moves with the quarterbacks? And were you surprised by either of the two big ones?
No, I was not surprised by either of the two big ones. And as of this recording, Aaron Rodgers still out there, Russell Wilson still out there, Daniel Jones still out there, the Kirk Cousins situation in Atlanta. They still want to hold him. He'll have $10 million that becomes guaranteed here in the coming days. So we'll see if they decide anything. So we're going to have more quarterback movement here. But let's start with the big one, which was the worst kept secret in the NFL, really since Friday when Geno Smith was traded from the Seahawks to the Raiders. It was Sam Darnold over here going from the Minnesota Vikings to the Seattle Seahawks. 3 years, $100.5 million, could make more in incentives as well. But this is a very similar contract to what the Seahawks offered Geno Smith, which he declined, and eventually is the reason why he was traded to the Raiders. And they were like, if you're not going to take it, they tampered a little bit with Sam Darnold to see if he would take it. He wink, said, okay. So they traded Geno, and here they are now getting this deal done officially on Monday afternoon Eastern. He becomes the new quarterback for this team, which, I mean, look at it. No Tyler Lockett anymore. No DK Metcalf anymore. We're going to see what they do here with their receivers, because their receiver room right now, outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba, needs a lot of help. So the receiver market has not moved so much so far here in free agency. I would anticipate Seattle getting involved over there. But he is going to be the new quarterback, and he's going to reunite with Clint Kubiak, the new Seahawks offensive coordinator, who was in San Francisco for that 1 year that Sam Darnold was there a couple of years ago. So there is some familiarity over there. This contract, by the way, also very similar to the 3-year, $100 million deal that Baker Mayfield signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is kind of the blueprint deal for these type of quarterbacks here in the NFL, and Sam Darnold gladly took that deal. The other big quarterback move, of course, was the Jets, and they have go out there. They signed Justin Fields, 2 years, $40 million, $30 million of it is going to be guaranteed. And for Justin Fields, he had interest from the Steelers to remain there and become their quarterback this year, but it wasn't a full commitment, I would say. And that was really his decision of year, where it's like, I want to go somewhere where I know I'm the starter. In Chicago, of course, we know the situation when he was there. Caleb Williams gets drafted. They trade him away. In Pittsburgh, he comes in with Russell Wilson. He wanted to be in a place where this is going to be my team. And the Jets, We'll see if they keep their word, but they told him, you're going to be our guy. You are reunited now with Garrett Wilson, who he was with together in Ohio State. Garrett Wilson reacted on Instagram to the signing. He's very happy. I would expect him to get an extension at some point this offseason as well to keep it going with the Jets. But Justin Fields is going to become the quarterback for new head coach Aaron Glenn. And keep in mind, Aaron Glenn, when he was in Detroit, he took on a guy like Jared Goff, who many people were like, oh, his career is over. He was a throw-in in that trade. People are not viewing Justin Fields as a real guy in the NFL. Aaron Glenn has done this before, been around somebody like Jared Goff. He's going to try to rejuvenate Justin Fields' career, and maybe, just maybe, he becomes a potential franchise quarterback for the Jets. Still very young, former top 10, 11 pick in the draft. They want to see that potential over here with the Jets. And with this contract, they're paying him significant money to become the guy moving forward. And think about the Jets for a second. I know everyone likes to laugh about them. They're not, everyone tries to clown them, bad year, whatever. This team has talent. I mean, the offense, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson. You look at the offensive line, they drafted Olu Fashanu last year, who I believe is a cornerstone left tackle. Elijah Vera Tucker is up there. Their defense has a bunch of young pieces there. And keep in mind, I think they're going to be adding more pieces over here in free agency as well. They've already signed Brandon Stevens, the cornerback from Baltimore, Andre Sisco, the safety from the Jaguars. So this is a roster that is sneaky good. And I think it's a team that thinks they could win over here this year. And it's not a tanking year or a rebuilding year. They really think they could win over here this year and be a little bit competitive. So those are the big two quarterback moves, and the ripple effects we're going to see it here on Tuesday. I mean, Minnesota now, J.J. McCarthy is the only one there. Does Daniel Jones go back? I believe he does have an offer right now that is similar to the Sam Darnold offer from last year. We'll see if that gets done, or maybe already got done by the time you're listening to this. But I also know he has interest from a team like the Colts, so we'll see where that goes. The Steelers, Russell Wilson's still out there. They have not had active negotiations with him. They've been keeping tabs on him, but Justin Fields was the one quarterback they wanted to keep from the two guys they had last year. Is the Aaron Rodgers thing going to happen? There's been more and more talk building up around the NFL. Rodgers to Pittsburgh. The Giants are also keeping an eye on it. So the ripple effects to all of this, we're going to see it coming over here. And you mentioned some of the quarterbacks who signed before, Ben, but there are more guys out there who are waiting for those bridge guys, Gardner Minshew, Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco. Those guys are all out there over here as well, Mac Jones, and we'll see what ends up happening with them here in the next, couple of hours over here throughout the course of the day.
Yeah, let's go ahead and keep moving on through the offense. The running back market was a little bit slower, although we did see Najee Harris get close to $10 million. Aaron Jones re-upped with the Vikings. We saw a few other moves like guys like Elijah Mitchell, Samaje Perine, if you look up some Jason Light stuff on X, it's a good laugh. From the wide receiver position, we obviously saw guys like T. Higgins re-sign, Devontae Adams go to the Rams this weekend, Chris Godwin's re-upping with the Buccaneers. So not a whole lot of craziness out of the wide receiver stuff. We do think that Cooper Kupp is ultimately going to be released. He's not going to be someone that they're going to be able to trade. So a little bit of an unfortunate situation there. I think the Rams fans would love to have seen him there. Tight end, Zach Ertz re-upping. Mike Gesicki gets paid with the Bengals to stay there as well. We've got a few other guys here there, Tanner Hudson, Luke Farrell. But the big position and group I want to get to more than anything else here is the offensive linemen. Although they may not be the sexiest names to normally talk about, these dudes got absolutely paid. If you are even an average offensive lineman on the day of March 10th, 2025, you probably became a very rich man.
I mean, we spoke about this here on Monday morning's episode. Just be ready for offensive linemen that you might not even know who they are getting paid crazy money, because finding offensive linemen is not easy. And most of these guys, the good ones, almost never make it to the open market. I mean, before free agency even started, Ronnie Stanley back to Baltimore, Alaric Jackson back to the Rams. Like, these guys were not making it to the open market. And it was like very frustrating to some of these teams who are like, we want those guys, but we're not getting them. But we need help on the offensive line. What are we going to do? So Dan Moore was probably the most stunning number out there. 4 years, $82 million, started all 4 years in Pittsburgh, over 60 starts, but above average, I would say, at best, as an offensive tackle. But the Titans needed somebody. New GM Mike Borgonzi, J.C. Latham last year, their top 7 pick, was playing left. They needed to move him to right. Now he's able to go to right. You put Dan Moore left. But this is a very significant amount for a player who if he was not on the market, would not be getting $20 million. Like the Steelers were like, yeah, we'll let you go. We'll use our first round rookie from a year ago, Broderick Jones, at left tackle. But this is what it was over here for to be able to get these type of players, and the Titans needed an offensive lineman. They got him. Jalen Moore, the 49ers free agent offensive tackle, 2 years, $30 million to become the Chiefs left tackle over here. Moving forward, Jalen Moore started a handful of games. I mean, he was really the backup to Trent Williams, who's one of the greatest of all time. In those 4 or 5 games, which he started this year, that tape was good enough to give him $15 million per year to become the new left tackle. We know Joe Thuney got traded. He was playing some left tackle this past year. It does sound like the plan for Kansas City moving forward is to either have Caliendo, who was starting this year a little bit at the back end at left guard, or their second round pick out of BYU from last year, who I've said many times, I can't pronounce his last name, so I won't even try. One of those two guys are going to be their left tackle. But Jalen Moore now takes over at left tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs and this remade offensive line. Some other guys here who got paid big time money. Morgan Moses goes to the New England Patriots. He's a Mike Vrabel type of player through and through. 3 years, $24 million, quite literally plays through any and all injuries, which most people will not be able to. Perfect fit for what Mike Vrabel wants to do. But the Patriots were looking for offensive lineman help throughout the course of the day, these last couple of weeks. They wanted Dan Moore. They wanted Jalen Moore. Both those prices to them got a little bit too expensive, so they pivot to Morgan Moses, who will likely be their right tackle over here moving forward. Patrick McCarry, from the Baltimore Ravens, he ends up in Jacksonville, 3 years, $37.5 million. Once again, double-digit APY for him. And then the other players here that we saw that were stunning, Aaron Banks, another 49ers player, going to the Packers, 4 years, $77 million. This was a very strong deal when you look at the contract details over here. And this was one leading up to the week where people were saying, yeah, this one could get to $20 million per year. It didn't get to that point, but got very, very close. And the Packers, who usually are not the craziest spenders in free agency, for the second straight years, are spending big time money on players. Last year, Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs. This year, they go after Aaron Banks. They also made a cornerback addition, Nate Hobbs, which we'll get to in a second. But they are spending big time money over here to solidify the offensive line. I would imagine this means that Elton Jenkins, who has been playing guard, tackle for them, he could potentially slide over to center, because I don't know where he fits into this equation right now, even though they paid him a couple of years ago. So we'll see what their full decision on that is here in the coming days and weeks. But the offensive line market has been going absolutely insane. We're still waiting for a couple guys to get paid. Maybe it'll happen by the time you listen to this, but like Will Fries from the Colts, Mekhi Becton from the Eagles, those guys are still out there. Kevin Zeiler, Brandon Scherf, veteran guys a little bit, third contract guys are also out there. So we will see what ends up happening over here. But offensive linemen, hard to get, almost never make the open market. When they do, they get paid big money, and that's what happened here on Monday.
Yeah, and the other group that paid to be big on this day was the defensive line and edge.
I forgot one more offensive lineman. I'm sorry, Ben, but the centers. We cannot forget the centers. But Drew Dahlman also going to the Chicago. We got to talk about this also, because this deal was, I hate to say it, it's been done for a couple of days, but Drew Dahlman, we mentioned on Monday, we mentioned him last week, keeping it on the Bears. Drew Dahlman from the Falcons was limited last year because of an ankle injury. I'm sorry I forgot about him. He ends up going to Chicago, 3 years, $42 million, makes him one of the highest paid centers in football. And the Bears' offensive line has been revamped. Really, their offensive line and defensive line, we'll get there in a second, but their offensive line now, left tackle Braxton Jones, Joe Thuney left guard, Drew Dahlman center, right guard Jonah Jackson, right tackle Darnell Wright. They basically have fixed up their entire interior of the offensive line in a matter of a week over here for Ben Johnson. So forgot to mention him, but Drew Dahlman going to Chicago, a deal that everyone knew was also happening over here going into Monday.
Can't miss the centers. Can't miss the centers. All right, let's go ahead and talk about what I was trying to get to, which is the defensive linemen, because they did great. The DL and the edge saw a lot of money being shelled out. Guys like Josh Sweat head to the Cardinals. Hassan Reddick, the guy who didn't want to figure out a contract last year, was suddenly like the first one off the board, which was shocking. Going to the Buccaneers, 1 year, $14 million. Khalil Mack re-upping with the Chargers. Malcolm Kuntz re-upping with the Raiders on a 1-year deal. Landry to the Patriots. We even saw guys like Chase Young get paid later in the day, but he's going to be sticking with the New Orleans Saints. Can you tell me a little bit about some of these moves that took place with the defensive line and the edge players?
Well, let's start with the biggest one that happened, and that was Milton Williams to the New England Patriots. And this was one of the crazier ones to follow up to the minute when it was happening before it was announced. This was also going on when Twitter was down, which was also funny to follow. But Milton Williams had a market that got out of control, like completely out of control. There were three teams that were vying for him going back to the weekend. The Eagles knew he was gone. They had no chance of retaining him. And his people, his agents started looking around, seeing where the market is going to fall. Last week, Osa Odigizua got 4 years, $80 million. That's $20 million per year. That was lower than they were expecting. So they were scared that maybe they won't get the number they were expecting. But here we go. Sunday, Monday rolls around, and Panthers, Patriots, Cardinals are going after him hard. Cardinals have Jonathan Gannon, his former defensive coordinator. Panthers made it an emphasis on working on the defensive line. And of course, the Patriots, Mike Vrabel, most cap space in the NFL. All three of them are going crazy. Now, at one point, it was like Panthers are going to get a deal done. This thing is trending towards them. Their agents have been exclusively negotiating with them. All of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. And it's like the Cardinals and Patriots are just making the price go up and up and up. People were expecting this deal to fall at 20 to 21, maybe $22 million per year. It lands at $26 million per year on a 4-year, $104 million deal for Milton Williams, which is a shocking number, probably the most shocking number that we had over here on the on Monday when it comes to all the players. We mentioned the offensive lineman before. This one was even more shocking to some people with it getting to $26 million per year. The Patriots badly wanted him on their defensive line. And it's an interesting situation because when you ask other executives, it's like, is he really a $20 million per year player? Probably not, but he's going to have competition. It's a position that every team is trying to improve at. So his market is only going to go up. And we're going to see how he does in New England. I mean, they now have Harold Landry on the defensive line as well. Milton joining, of course. And their defensive coordinator, Terrell Williams, is somebody who is a defensive line guy through and through. So clearly he played a big role in all of this as well. But keep in mind, this is Milton Williams who had Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Josh Sweat and those type of players on the Eagles defensive line. So a fascinating contract over there, and the entire story and how it all unfolded behind the scenes was very fun to follow. But he ends up here in New England. Some other deals that happened over here. Grady Jarrett, we'll talk about him for a second. He was released by the Falcons. He was a cut candidate going into the offseason. We talked about him a couple of weeks ago. 10 years in Atlanta. Multiple-time Pro Bowler, Walter Payton Man of the Year type of a guy, gets released by the Falcons. It only took a couple of hours later. He already signs with the Chicago Bears on a big 3-year, $43.5 million deal. And that was not the only deal that Chicago did on the defensive line. They also go out there and sign Dayo Odenigbo from the Colts on a big deal as well. He gets as well a 3-year deal on $54 million. And if you're realizing a theme over here in Chicago, it's all about the trenches. We mentioned the 3 offensive linemen they added before. Now they add these 2 defensive linemen as well to join the guys that they currently have on the team, like a Montez Sweat. That is what they had the emphasis on over here. And they are building a roster over here that is starting to look really, really good on paper. Ben Johnson knows it all starts on the front in those trenches, and they've prioritized it over here throughout the offseason so far over here. Over the last week, both those players were bound to get big money after Grady Jarrett was released. Still a really good player. Falcons had some cap issues. They move on from him. And of course, Dio was a player we mentioned who was going to get a good deal. Young player, ascending player, makes sense for the Chicago Bears. Josh Sweat to the Arizona Cardinals. We mentioned Milton Williams and the Cardinals trying to get him. Josh is also from Philadelphia. Familiarity with the new head coach in Jonathan Gannon. This was a very interesting situation because there was not much talk about Josh Sweat over here leading up to free agency. We're talking about all these other players. No one was talking about him. I could finally say it now, but there was a little bit of concern around the NFL with a knee issue that Josh Sweat had dating back to college. It's been a medical issue for a while, but the Cardinals clearly okay with it. Go ahead and sign him to this big 4-year deal over $75 million, a hefty guarantee as well. And they've been focused on the trenches over here these last couple of offseason. Last year, they signed a couple of defensive linemen. This offseason now, they signed Josh Sweat. They were trying to get Milton Williams. They also re-signed Baron Browning as Jonathan Gannon tries to work on his defensive line. But a pretty big deal over here for Josh Sweat, who, I'll be honest with you, at least from what I heard, Not the biggest market you would expect, especially for somebody who you thought could have been Super Bowl MVP a couple of months ago in the Super Bowl, but he ends up getting paid by the Arizona Cardinals. But I do know he was hoping to get 23, 24, $25 million per year. That does not end up coming to fruition, but he ends up here in Arizona. Some other deals that happened, Ben, you mentioned some of them. Hassan Reddick to Tampa Bay, 1 year, $14 million, trying to basically get his market back, try to have a big year in Tampa Bay, a full offseason, OTAs and everything. We know what happened last year. Eagles, Jets trade, requested trade again, not show up, miss games, show up, team stinks. It was a mess. Wants to reset in Tampa Bay with a team that has a really, really good defense and a really good defensive line and a defensive-minded head coach in Todd Bowles. The goal is to have a good year, get back to free agency next year, maybe become the Josh Sweat of next year's free agent market. Khalil Mack back to the Chargers. That was a team, a head coach in Jim Harbaugh who really, really wanted him back. 1 year, $18 million. Every single dollar is guaranteed. Chase Young back to the Saints, 3 years, $51 million. Signed that 1 year prove-it deal last year. Proved he could stay healthy playing in all 17 games. And the Saints now reward him with this deal to go back to New Orleans over here. Really strong deal for him, finally cashing in as a former number 2 overall pick, and especially after all those injuries he had early in his career with his knee. Some other ones we have not mentioned over here. Malcolm Kuntz missed all of last year with an ACL. Back with the Raiders, 1 year prove-it deal. He hopes to get back to the market next year after proving he could have a big year coming off that injury. And a couple of other guys who re-signed with their current teams. Jerron Reed back to Seattle. BJ Hill back to Cincinnati. Puna Ford actually signed with the other LA team, going from the Chargers to the Rams. And then DJ Jones returning to the Denver Broncos on a 3-year, $39 million deal. But a lot of movement over here on both sides of the trenches, offensive line, defensive line. And there's still a bunch of guys over here who are waiting for. Jonathan Allen had a meeting with the Vikings. People believe that could get done as well. Javon Hargrave is out there. Some buzz about the Browns and the Steelers. Larry Agunjobi was released by the Steelers. Dalvin Tomlinson was released by the Browns. We're going to have a lot more movement over here throughout the course of today over here on the defensive line. But a very active day on the trenches over here, Ben.
Well, it was actually not that active of a day for the linebacking crew. Zach Bond, Nick Bolton, Bobby Wagner, Levante David, Ernest Jones, Jamin Sherwood, Derek Barnes, all of those guys actually re-upped with their teams, and a lot of them we saw do it before we even got to today. Robert Spillane did sign with the Patriots on a 3-year, $33 million deal. We saw Dre Greenlaw get a very similar contract of 3 years, $35 million with the Broncos. So we're going to go ahead and speed by the linebackers. Love them, but we're not going to talk about them right this moment. The group I do want to talk about now, we're going to go ahead and lump them together to the defensive backs. We're going to put the corners and safeties together. It was a really, really nice day, and we're still seeing some of those guys trickle in with some of these big deals like Byron Murphy. Can you tell us a little bit about like the Carlton Davis deal, the Travarius Ward deal, DJ Reed, and just give us a little bit of context as to why we saw so many of these big name guys get a little bit more than what we were expecting and also come off the board like really quickly?
Yeah, this was the other position group, the DBs that we mentioned last week to end the week and on Monday morning on the episode. Keep an eye on the DBs. It's going to fly off the board and they're going to get some big money over here. And that's exactly what happened over here. Let's start with an interesting team over here. The Indianapolis Colts, who have not been a spending team in free agency historically, made 2 gigantic moves over here in the secondary. They go out there and sign Travarius Ward from the 49ers. That deal I know is reported as 3 years and $60 million. It's going to come out to 3 years and $54 million with upside to 60. They get him and Cam Bynum, the Viking safety, as well to join them there in Indianapolis. And I think that deal was 4 years and $60 million for Cam Bynum. But Chris Ballard, their GM, he actually mentioned at his end of season press conference, one of my biggest regrets from last offseason was not being active in free agency and thinking we could just run it back with this team and get Anthony Richardson back and be fine. He knows he's on the hot seat going into this year, and he's changing his ways over here. The secondary needed help. They go out there and sign both these guys to gigantic contracts. Now, Cam Bynum leaving Minnesota basically made Minnesota go and pivot and try to make sure they lock in Byron Murphy, their cornerback, who got the biggest deal of everybody over here of all the defensive backs. He signs a 3-year, $66 million contract. That is $22 million per year for him. Instantly makes him a top 5 highest paid cornerback in football. This is a player who has been unbelievable for them since signing that 2-year deal a couple of years ago. Pro Bowler this past year, interception guy, pass deflection guy. We had their defensive backs coach, Durante Jones, here on the show a couple of months ago. Unprompted, he mentioned how important Byron Murphy is for the organization, for the defense, for the team. And he mentioned he's somebody we should get on the NFL Spotlight show and spotlight how much of an amazing player he is over here. So they made sure to show that to him with the money they paid him. 3 years, $66 million. The other cornerback moves, these moved really quickly over here. Carlton Davis goes to New England. It was reported as 3 years and 60. The real numbers over there are going to be 3 years and $54 million. The other $6 million are in incentives for him. But New England, I mean, we mentioned it. They had the most money going into the day. They were spending left and right. We talked about Milton Williams before, Carlton Davis, Harold Landry, and on and on. They were making a lot of moves throughout the course of the day. And think about this defensive back room now in New England. Christian Gonzalez on one side, Carlton Davis on the other side. And they're working on that defensive line, of course, with Landry and Milton Williams and those types of players, Keon White. That's a defense right now that is slowly but surely starting to come together. And if they bring the grit that Mike Vrabel wants the team to have, that is a very, very interesting defense over here unfolding over there in New England. Paulson Adebo is another player that we mentioned who could have a big number come in. He signed with the New York Giants, 3 years, $54 million for him. Giants have been looking for secondary help. They're also in the safety market as of this recording. They have not signed a safety yet. They were trying to sign Cam Bynum. They've been in on Javon Holland, who as of this recording has not signed yet. So they really wanted to revamp that secondary last year. They saw their former first-round pick, Banks, take a bit of a step back. That kind of hurt them a little bit. So they go out there. Paulson Adebo, who missed some time last year with an injury, gets the bag regardless of year. He was one of the more younger defensive backs here on the market. He heads to the New York Giants. DJ Reed, Carlton Davis left Detroit. DJ Reed comes into Detroit. He was another player who had a really, really strong market. Pittsburgh was also in on him, but he ends up landing in Detroit, $16 million per year for him. He's going to pair up with their former first-round pick in Terrion Arnold as the new cornerback duo there in Detroit as the Lions make a splash at the cornerback position. Carlton Davis got a little bit too expensive. They pivot over to DJ Reed. And then lastly, when it comes to the cornerbacks, we mentioned them before, Nate Hobbs going to the Green Bay Packers, 4 years, $48 million. That makes him the highest paid slot cornerback over here in the NFL. This was a priority for Green Bay. They were actually pushing really hard to get this deal done throughout the course of the day. And then it finally got done. I actually posted that one on X. I don't usually try to break news first. I hear a lot of stuff, but that was one where they kind of told me just go with it, and I did. And here we are. So that was one that they were working on throughout the course of the day, and it finally got done over there during the course of Monday. Packers spending big money over there. We also saw Jordan Lewis go to Jacksonville, 3 years and $30 million. Brandon Stevens to the Jets, 3 years and $36 million. Cornerback market was very, very hot. We're still waiting for Jair Alexander to potentially be released by Green Bay. That would add another player. Darius Slay, still a free agent. There's a report out there he's going to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let me just give some context to that over here. Darius Slay is still on the Eagles as of right now. He's going to be designated as a post-June 1 release. If you're going to post-June 1 release somebody, you cannot do that until the new league year begins, which is on Wednesday. But the Eagles basically told Darius, hey, we're going to release you. Your agent could speak to other teams. He has started talking to other teams. That includes the Steelers. Now, a deal is not done yet, but Pittsburgh is a favorite to sign Darius Slay, but that could change. And who knows, the Eagles might try to pivot and say, if you're signing with that amount of money with Pittsburgh, maybe we'll get you back for a little bit less. Do you want to come back? We've heard Darius Slay say he wants to finish his career in Philadelphia or Detroit. So that one is still fluid and it's not done yet. We'll see what happens there. Stephon Gilmore is still out there. Christian Fulton is still out there. There are some players like that out there. Asante Samuel Jr. is also out there. I think his market will take some time. There's some stuff going on over there. We cannot really talk about much of it, but that market might take some time for a player like him. As for the safeties, Javon Holland, as of this recording, is still a free agent. I think he was expecting his market to be much higher. It's not where he was expecting. Some teams are still very interested. That includes the Giants, the Titans. They were in on him. We'll see what happens with him. Maybe a deal gets done by the time this gets published, but as of right now, he is still a free agent. Miami also would like to have him back as well. Trevon Moehrig was the big safety to come off the board. 3 years, $51 million, another big splash move for the Carolina Panthers. That was their number one safety on their board, and they go out there and get him on this big deal. They love him on the back end of the defense. They love him also coming close to the line of scrimmage. He's a willing tackler, clean guy, started basically all 4 years in Las Vegas. He is somebody they prioritize. Their fallback option would have been Javon Holland, but they got a deal done with Morey to come back. We spoke about Bynum going to Indianapolis. Talanoa Hufanga ends up going to the Denver Broncos. The Broncos also were in the safety market throughout the course of the day. They were in on Cam Bynum, ended up pivoting over to Hufanga, who gets a 3-year, $45 million deal. Some other deals that happened: Andre Cisco, 1 year, $10 million to the Jets. Jeremy Chin, 2 years and $16 million to the Raiders to basically be the Moehrig replacement in Las Vegas for Pete Carroll. But there are some other safeties out there. Justin Reed, Javon Holland, we mentioned. DeMar Hamlin is out there. Justin Simmons, Julian Blackmon, Xavier Woods, who played 100% of the snaps last year in Carolina. Those guys are still out there, and their markets are also going to be moving over here throughout the course of today.
Well, we knew that the teams that had a whole lot of cap space were really going to be the ones that were setting the tone for how dollars and cents were going to be spent on some of these top guys. The New England Patriots came out hard from the word go and said, we're going to be setting the pace on these guys, and we're going to go out there and get the guys that we want, no matter how much it really costs. Are you surprised that they were the ones that definitely seemed like they were the most aggressive on day one?
Not surprised at all. I mean, they have the most cap space in the NFL by far. And I mean, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but before Monday started, I put out a tweet: 2 teams to watch today, Patriots, Panthers. And of course, they were probably 2 of the biggest spenders throughout the course of the day. I think that tweet went out like 8 in the morning. So a lot of these deals were kind of done or in the works already going into Monday. NFL does not want you to know that. But the Patriots were always bound to be one of the busier teams here throughout today. And we saw them spending galore, signing players, whoever it was. I mean, they were all out there. We mentioned some of them throughout the episode today. But Morgan Moses, Milton Williams, Robert Spillane, Harold Landry, all those players joining them over here in New England. And they're not done. I mean, they still have so much more cap space to spend over here. They have not addressed the receiver position yet. They were the team, by the way. We didn't talk about Chris Godwin yet, but Godwin returned to Tampa Bay, 3 years, over $16 million. The team that really wanted him was they offered more than Tampa Bay, and Godwin loves Tampa Bay, wants to stay there. We hear about the tax part a lot. No state tax in Florida. There is state tax, of course, in Massachusetts. I still think he would have got more money in New England regardless of the tax over there, but he wanted to stay with Mike Evans, with Baker Mayfield, and that deal got done. But Patriots are still very much in a lot of these positions over here. They have a lot of work to do, and they're still trying to find a wide receiver as well. So they're not done at all over here. So no surprise that they were active over here, and more to come over there here in New England.
On the flip side of things, there were definitely some teams that were quiet. Everyone always likes to point out teams like the Dallas Cowboys who didn't necessarily go out there. My Baltimore Ravens really didn't do a whole lot. Were you surprised by some of the teams that really weren't aggressive, even in some cases at all?
I mean, this is what I'll say. I mean, free agency, a lot of people love watching that first wave in the first day. Some teams like just sitting back and watching, and let's just see all these teams spend great money on good players. That's the line that these teams always say. You're paying A plus money for B minus B plus players. And some teams, the Ravens, the Chargers, like those types of teams, they don't want to do that. Bill Belichick for years in New England, they don't want to do that. They're like, let those things happen first. Let those guys be the offseason champions. We want to be the regular season and Super Bowl champions. And that's what happened. That was just day one of free agency. More is to come over here. More trades are coming, by the way. More signings are coming. And some people wait for the money to dry up, the market to dry up, and we get some value deals. Look at what Washington did last year. Some of the players they signed last year on cheap contract, they waited out a little bit, got those players. That's going to happen over here. That's what teams like Baltimore like to do. That seems like the Chargers like to do. Some of these teams who are not so desperate and have a good roster and not looking to throw money around, they are willing to wait. Now, the Cowboys, I know everyone likes to make fun of them. They only signed Javonte Williams, the running back over here, so far in free agency. They re-signed their long snapper, which everyone likes to make fun of. But they have a lot of money over here to their current players. They do not plan on being crazy aggressive on these players. That's the way it's always been for them. But they're checking in on some of these guys over here throughout the course of the day, and they're waiting for the money to come down. That's just the way they are. I mean, they're going to tell you we're paying 60 million a year to Dak and 35 a year to CD and 20 to Osa, and we might have to do Micah for 40 or whatever the number is. We just can't do everyone. That's what they're going to tell you. But they could if they want, and there are going to be players out there who I think make sense for them. And we're going to see what they end up doing over here throughout the course of these next couple of days and weeks. But if you're expecting the Dallas Cowboys to be in on a player and pay $15-20 million per year, it's just not going to happen with that roster and where they are. They don't believe in that. I think I saw a stat. The last time they paid a free agent more than $8 or $9 million per year was like Greg Hardy, like 8 years ago.
Yeah,
So
it was 6
they just
million.
don't do
It wasn't
it.
even that. It
It's
was
like,
6 million.
so there you go. So like they just don't believe in it. They like retaining their own players, develop their own players and pay their own players. That's how they do it. So that's the way the Cowboys operate, and they'll let everyone laugh at them, but that's the way they work.
Well, let's talk about another team in Texas that I think kind of made a surprising move on the first day of free agency, and that was sending
Yeah.
Laremy Tunsil out to the Washington Commanders. We talked about how CJ Stroud needs protection, and then they go and they take the one really good offensive lineman they have and they ship him somewhere else. Why did this happen?
The reason, so first of all, this surprised me. It was a shocking trade. I was not ready for it. It's unbelievable. And now the Commanders have now traded for 3 players in the last 4 or 5 months with Lattimore, Devo Samuel, and now Laremy Tunsil with a bunch of picks going back and forth over here. Houston getting more picks. The reason they'll tell you that they did this was simply because they're going to have to pay a bunch of guys over here this offseason. Derek Stingley becomes extension eligible. They felt like Laremy Tunsil is getting up there in age, and they feel like they could refill that position, whether it's in the draft or in free agency. Now, we mentioned before, it's hard to find left tackles in football, and to have a guy get traded like this, it is stunning and shocking and unbelievable, and it's really hard to believe. I don't know what the plan right now is for Houston here on the offensive line. How do they fix this? I mean, they moved on from a guy like Shaq Mason, who did not have a good year, by the way, but that's a guard that they moved on from who started 15 games. Now you move on from Laremy Tunsil, who, of course, has been a great player for you. You have Titus Howard. Do you want to flip him over to the left side? Are they going to go after a player like Cam Robinson, who's a free agent? I know Jedrick Wills is out there. I don't think he's going to sign anytime soon. He's been dealing with this knee issue, which has been nagging him, so I don't see that being an option. Tyron Smith is out there. He's somebody who I think could be leaning towards retirement if he doesn't get a deal he likes. George Fant is out there. He's been in Houston before. That's also an aging player. I don't know what the plan right now is in Houston. The offensive line was a major issue last year, and CJ Stroud throughout the course of the year did not play like CJ Stroud in his rookie year, in part because of the offensive line. So losing Laremy Tunsil does not make much sense to me. They do get a lot more picks over here. Maybe there is a plan over here where the offensive line group in the draft, there are some guys available over there. Maybe that's where they're looking at over here and trying to get younger. But until we see the answer over here, Nick Caserio, their GM, is a forward-thinking man. He's not somebody who just does trades. He comes from New England. He has a plan. What is up his sleeve? I do not have the answer right now, but Washington getting more protection for their quarterback in Jaden Daniels. And for a couple of days, I don't think we spoke about it here on the show, but Washington has been asking some of their players to take pay cuts, and that includes some players on the offensive line. Agents for those players were thinking that's them bluffing, but clearly they were not bluffing. They had something up their sleeve. So the deal, of course, was Laremy Tunsil, and he now joins that offensive line in Washington. We'll see what they do with the rest of the offensive line. They have Allegretti at guard. They have Andrew Wiley at right tackle. They have Brendan Coleman, who they drafted last year in the 3rd round, who was their left tackle. Do they make any moves over there? Sam Cosmi, of course, tore his ACL in the divisional round of the championship game. So they have moving parts over here on the offensive line, but some people thought the Commanders were like, yeah, they're not going to actually go out there and sign somebody or trade for somebody. They make a huge move in getting Laremy Tunsil. And again, I have no idea what the Texans are going to do, but their GM, Nick Caserio, is somebody who definitely has plans and thinks of many different things. If you're watching Nick Caserio press conference, he loves saying the word buckets. He loves saying we have these players in different buckets where we put them in and we try to build the roster. So I'm sure he has a bucket of left tackles he's trying to get. The question is who, and we'll find out over here very soon. I'm sure we will.
Definitely did not hear you say buckets the first time. I'll leave that there. Let's go ahead and move on to the guys that are still available. You've spoken about a lot of the guys that are still out there, guys like Aaron Rodgers, Justin Reed, Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Stephon Diggs. There's like some big name guys that a lot of people, household names, have heard of. And there's a good chance that by the time you guys are either watching or listening to this, depending on when it is in the day, some of these guys are already off the board. Do you expect any of the, the bigger name guys, the more household guys to be potentially signed by the end of today?
Yeah, I mean, I would expect some of these guys to come off the board. I think Javon Holland will come off the board at some point over here. As of this recording, he's not. I think he will over here, possibly by the time you listen to this. But those cornerbacks, those safeties, we mentioned them, the offensive linemen, defensive linemen, the positions that have been hot will remain hot. I think Justin Reed will sign over here very soon. I don't think he'll be back in Kansas City, but we'll see. I know they want him back, but I'm not sure if they have the money for him. We'll see what happens with him. But those positions should move. The interesting ones are, running backs. We saw Najee Harris come off the board. 1-year deal. We still don't know exactly what the real number on that is. I know it was up to $9 million or whatever, but we'll see what the real numbers is when it officially comes in. But Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins now with Najee in, where does he go? Rico Dowdle had over 1,000 yards in Dallas. Where does he go? Javonte Williams now in Dallas. Those type of players out there. Raheem Mostert, I know he has interest from a couple of teams, former Pro Bowler, but that market has been slow. We'll see if there's any movement there. But the position markets that have been slow, that sometimes just takes some time. Receiver, we've seen Chris Godwin come off the board. He was the number one receiver on most people's list. Devontae Adams got a really good deal for a guy who's up there in age. But after that, the two guys who did sign on Monday, De'Ami Brown, Darius Slayton, they're more younger guys. They come off the board. Those veteran guys, Stephon Diggs coming off an injury, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Tyler Lockett, DeAndre Hopkins, Deontay Johnson, Mike Williams. Those guys are all used to having interest and money and all that coming to them. And right now it's not coming to them. It's kind of weird. It's like, who's going to sign first? Who's going to set the market? So they're all having the staring contest of who goes first, and then we'll start and you set the market. So until that happens with those veteran guys, that one might take some time. And then the tight ends also has been pretty slow over here as well. We've seen a bunch of guys re-sign with their teams like a Mike Gesicki and a Zach Ertz and an Austin Hooper and a John Bates and a Tommy Trumbull. All those guys return to their teams. But the other guys who are still out there, Evan Ingram, Tyler Conklin, Jawan Johnson, Mo Alley Cox, those guys are still out there, and they're also waiting for who's going to set the market for a tight end, who's going to sign with a new team. So we're waiting for that over here as well. So those weapons, the position groups, a little bit slow so far, but it could pick up over here on Tuesday. All it takes is one guy to sign. So far, they're all waiting for who is going to be that guy to sign. But expect more action. And as always, we're going to have full coverage at My Sports Update on X. The 33rd-team.com has a full tracker. And here on YouTube, we're doing YouTube shorts, having some reactions to some of the biggest deals. And of course, we will be back over here tomorrow with another full reaction to the entire day that happened over here in the NFL. So that's coming up. Ben, I'll bring you back in if you have anything else to say, and we'll wrap it up.
Nope.
There you go. All right, Ben, we will be back over here tomorrow with our Wednesday edition of the show. And like I said, keep an eye out on YouTube for the shorts, subscribe, do all the good stuff, and we'll see you all here back tomorrow morning.